Shaw's Biz That Is. And with our guest today, David Hornick, we're talking about health insurance primarily. And we've been talking about some of the changes that have occurred over the last 13 years, consolidation, and you were talking about a second trend.
Yeah, well, the trend is just overall cost, okay? With constant expansion of healthcare services, I mean, we could do more, okay? People expect procedures that were radical or unheard of a number of years ago that become routine today. And you've often heard the debate about, well, the United States spends more of its gross domestic product for health care than other nations do. But I would question, nobody wants to pay for being sick. But if you are sick, most people think an expenditure of money to get well is a good use of money, okay? And as technology and as medicine continues to broaden and expand the envelope, people expect the procedures. They're wonderful, but they're very costly. So we see consolidation in the industry, but at the same time we see expansion of healthcare services and escalating costs, which in turn result in ever higher premiums.
I think one of the things I can notice, I can think back to little kids, small town Indiana, going to see the doctor, and there would be a receptionist. There might be somebody who was doing the paperwork, probably the billing, could have been the spouse, whatever, and that was pretty much it. Today you go in and there are 7, 8 people processing forms.
Sure.
And all of that drives cost.
It does, yeah. Well, this is another trend that you see in the industry. The era of the individual practitioner is pretty much over with, okay? The model where an individual doctor could set up a practice and have 1 or 2 staff support people is gone. He or she may have had an internal nurse to help with a routine treatments that may be delivered in an office, and you might have, like you say, a receptionist or a billing clerk that would go ahead and handle the billing. With the requirements that CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, in the Medicaid programs, those 2 federal programs, which cover a huge portion of the American body.
50%.
Yeah, probably so. And people who are older receive a lot more medical treatment. But to comply with the billing requirements, it requires a complexity of billing codes and people that need to interface and interact with it. So what is evolving, once again, another change within the health insurance world, is that most independent practitioners are either affiliating with larger clinics or in turn affiliating with hospitals. Here within the Wichita community, I think the Wichita Clinic, which used to be the largest freestanding clinic in the community, was acquired by one of the major hospital systems, I think Via Christi. And that's what you see that in the Topeka market. You also see it in the smaller markets of Kansas, Salina, Hayes, for instance, where hospitals are consolidating. Physicians, in turn, are really going to work for hospitals.
Well, and you've taken me a couple of directions here. I think we'll have time for them. One is the importance of the medical school here. We had Dr. Kellerman on the previous month, because that's where most of the family medicine or GPs come from in this state, is out of that operation. And the other is there have been some innovations. We've talked about Dr. Josh Umber here in Wichita, which is a concierge approach. I think a lot of people got the idea in places like California it was a Rodeo Drive deal. If you had enough money, you could have your doctor. But a different model, and the idea there is to get rid of a lot of that paperwork.
Yeah. Well, small business is the innovator in the economy, and the very consolidation we're seeing where all these independent physicians are going to work for larger entities, it does not portend well long term as far as innovation, within the medical community. So it's good that we have hospital programs within the state. I would like to see more medical schools, Okay, and to promote, you can't. I'd much rather have too many doctors than too many lawyers. Okay? and I say that a little tongue in cheek. I've got both physicians and lawyers in my family, which always makes for some pretty interesting Thanksgiving discussions. But
and Dave referees?
Well, no, I just get out of the way. Get out of the way. But you mentioned Dr. Josh Humbert, who has developed a really unique approach to the delivery of medicine. And he's bringing more effective treatment at a lesser unit cost, which is extraordinary, and which is what I hope we see more of. But you see that typically in a more diffuse marketplace as opposed to a consolidated marketplace.
Well, I'll give you some of my old poli-sci stuff.
Okay.
One of the most interesting things I ever read was by a guy named Feibelman. He was a professor down to LSU, and he talked about institutions and the I won't go into the theory, the concrete ontologies and all that. But what he said, and it's very clever, was you can tell what institutions are dominant by just look around. Go in a medieval town, it's a church.
Okay.
Go to American, it's a business. But institutions grow up providing answers for people. But once they get grown, they start defending answers. And that's part of the problem of bigness, whether it's a government or anything else. That you start defending that. That's why departments go on. You know, well. And it's almost always the new and the challenging that comes up with some. Gee, we could do that better. There's a better way to make that work.
Yeah. Tim, I think your insight's correct. With what I've recognized and seen in my lifetime, the innovation comes from the new, the small, and the larger institutions protect the status quo. And that's just the nature of the beast, I think. So, I think...
and they've got a lot of cheese to protect.
A bunch of cheese.
Well, maybe we should end it on that note.
Okay.
Before we get any farther into the food chain.
Okay.
And say thank you to David Hornick for being with us today. And we'll be back for another Wichita Biz That Is.
Tim, thanks so much.